So today is the 16th, February 16th, 2019. This is a reading for John. And so basically, let me just do an overview of everything. So I'm going to look at the fingerprints, and that represents your soul psychology. And that's like what you came here to be and to do. It doesn't change. So it's like a process that's always like unfolding. It's always in progress. There's no destination. It's always, you're going to uncover the next chapter of this life purpose or the life lesson. So it's always ongoing. So it's different from like you've arrived at this one point, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to look at like the hand formations, kind of like the dramatic glyphics that you have on your hand. So you have a fingerprint on your palmar surface, which means something. And then we're also going to talk about kind of just the line formations and the hand shape in general. And that's more of your personality psychology. So, I'll start with your life purpose because your hand kind of goes back to this. Actually, I'm going to start with the kind of the overall theme of your life and kind of work my way there. So, you have what we call tenon arches. I'm actually going to write out what you have so you can kind of see the symbols. So on the right hand, on the thumb, you have a gamut, which was a kind of like an unclassified print. And then you have a tenon arch, which is one of these. Tenon arch loop. Actually, I'm going to call this a tenon arch loop. These were loops. Loop. This was a... let me see your left hand really fast. Okay, it's... Arch. Loop, tenon arch. Okay, so kind of the overall theme of your life, you're in School of Wisdom. So School of Wisdom people, it's all about moving from an evaluation to action, right? These people, you guys are like the wise elders of the population, right? Okay. You came here to observe things, and you're really good at observing, you're really good at like seeing things from the outside. But the thing is, can you actually be a participant in your life? Can you actually put yourself out there in a vulnerable way? Because the tendency with School of Wisdom people is they tend to kind of insulate themselves with their knowledge. Or they'll be like, oh, all right, let me read another book or like take another class. Or they're really good at like accumulating knowledge, but the real knowledge comes from experience, from actually putting themselves out there in the world. So it's about, taking the risk of personal exposure, being a participant in your life. And, there's different diving boards that are life's diving boards, like changing careers is like jumping off a diving board. Asking the girl on a date is a life diving board. Getting married is a life diving board. And a lot of the time, School of Wisdom people can actually... They'll either, on one extreme, there'll be a bunch of undived diving boards that they never did. So it's like they never actually made the decision to actually do, one of those things that would actually put themselves out there at risk. And the other thing is they'll just jump off of many diving boards without even looking. Okay. So there's kind of two extremes of the same thing. But the thing is to kind of... jump off the diving board in a way where you're fully committing yourself. This is what I want to do. Putting yourself at stake, risking yourself emotionally. So it has to do with the vulnerability thing. And School of Wisdom, the challenge is, they can feel like they have gone through their whole lives without actually living their life. And they're just more of like an observer instead of actually being in there and actually doing the stuff that actually put them, in the game, betting their marbles, like putting themselves out there. So basically any decision can be a high dive situation. Any small decision can be, because it has to do with, risking yourself, putting yourself at risk. But if it doesn't have to do with emotional, it's really the emotional exposure that you're after. That's the one that's going to be it's going to feel really scary, but at the same time it's going to be feeling very meaningful to you. We're actually, one story is, let's see, the person that oh, I'm gonna ask this person, to marry me. Oh, but I'm gonna wait. I'll wait till things are like exactly the right way, and then I'll ask them. And then years pass and pass and pass, and then nothing ever happens. Or it could be like a career that, like, oh, I'll do that one of these days. I'll get into this line of work when things are, settled down. And so it's just kind of like a procrastination kind of thing that can happen. And it's a way of kind of keeping yourself safe by doing that. So yeah, school of wisdom, you guys are only 4% of 4% of the population, so it's kind of an uncommon school that you're in, but you guys are the wise elders, and in order to step up in like a wise person's career, you have to learn through experience. It has to be done through experience. Otherwise, it's gonna feel like it's just it's not you're not really risking yourself. Okay, so that's kind of overall theme of your life. So there isn't gonna be one time in your life where it doesn't have to do with making some sort of decision, putting yourself at stake, moving from a decision to an action or inaction, but making that decision from a place of, is this something that, am I trying to hide from something, or am I actually trying to, commit to something and be fully present and be vulnerable to it? And it works with your life purpose. Your life purpose is actually public impact in the healing arts. Yeah.
Okay.
So you are someone who's meant to inspire the masses. You're supposed to be a healer. You're someone who offers psychological insight. Your greatest meaning and fulfillment is going to be from a place of helping others, being that lantern holder, helping guide their way. And you have that dermatoglyphic in your in the moon area of your hand, which has to do with the moon is all about imagination, intuition, spirituality, everything that the thumb can't reach to it. The thumb has to do with doing. You also, because you have a gamut on your thumb, the thumb is about results oriented. So there is a part of your hand that is very, you need to build 3 feet of fence today and 3 feet of fence tomorrow. You need to see results. So there is that element in your hand. And the public impact in the healing arts is about, being egoless enough that you can go within yourself and really get that insight, that inner insight, and being egoish enough that you're able to put yourself out there in a way. And the challenge is, a lot of public impact in the healing arts, a lot of these people, one of them is kind of like not taking their career seriously. They'll fill their time up with, being the water cooler healer. That's like helping people on the side, or, giving free psychological insight or guidance, to whoever. Okay. But the ones that have really kind of found their spot have found a way to they're talking at conventions. They're putting themselves out there in the spotlight, because it's a kind of an out there. You have to find your stage. This life purpose is definitely a in the spotlight type of life purpose.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so there's usually 3 different elements that kind of go with this. There's like balancing the family time, career time, and then time for yourself. And usually the tendency is that 1 or 2 of these elements suffers. So, there's the healer that, the family needs him to be at home more, but he has this calling to be a healer, to be in the spotlight, to give insight to people. He needs to help people, but if the one of the 3 things are not balanced, then it can kind of make it very lopsided. So a way of hiding from this is like overbooking yourself with one-on-one sessions. That can be seen as like you were meant to be in front of an audience.
So on the one-on-one sessions, give me an example of that.
One-on-one sessions, so, it's easy to kind of fill your schedule if you were to do like, say you're a counselor or something, doing a bunch of those all the time on a smaller scale, when you're supposed to be in front of a group of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Is this resonating?
It actually is extremely.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yeah. No,
Okay. Yeah. So if you think of anyone that's in front of the stage, the Tony Robbins, the Dalai Lama, Oprah Winfrey, people that are offering guidance, psychological insight, helping inspire the masses. This is where you're going to find that life is the most juicy, is when you're doing this, when you're helping others. I mean, there's a lot of things in your hand. You also have the healing stigmata, which is another gift marker that also was seen on the hands of like nurses and stuff. That it's kind of the old school like gifted healer marking. But basically, you're gonna find that life is much more enjoyable when you're able to kind of help others and help kind of give them direction. Where was it? Giving them direction. And if you don't, here's the thing is like with these gift markers is that if you don't use them, they tend to backfire. Okay, so a lot of it has to do with, trust and surrender skills. Can you trust that you are a powerful conduit for healing, that you offer psychological insight, that you can be a growth consultant? And if you don't use this gift marker, it can show up as relationship issues, so blocked intimacy breakdown. So, you would always ask, like, if you're in a relationship with someone, you would want to put your healing practice first ahead of your relationship, because that will help your relationship.
I see.
Rather than putting your relationship first.
Right.
Yeah. So, and you also, let me see your left hand. You in the print, it kind of looked like it was, yeah. So you have the teardrop in the hand, and you have it on both hands. This is less than 1% of the population have this marker, and so spiritual teacher. Yeah, you're the world is God's message board for you. So you're meant to see, the way a leaf falls or the way the tea leaves are in the tea. You're able to kind of find meanings in everything and pick up on all these little things that most people would overlook. So, you also have, your hand shape is more square. I put square earth, air, and fire. The earth part of your hand is very much about results oriented. And I can see that's why your current job, it's like getting stuff done, seeing that you've built this much of the roof, or this much of the roof is completed, seeing that things follow through to completion. That's a very earth quality. And then the air is all about, kind of like the thinking, the brainstorming. And then the fire in the air is kind of the illuminator. So, it's, how can you turn your healing practice into something that, maybe has more of a tangible, measurable results to it. So maybe it's like, one person that I read has similar thing, but he had earth hands, earth fire. So it was like he would build homes for the homeless. So that was his way, like doing stuff, because he was a doer, he had to do stuff, was to kind of build things for people that were not doing so well. Okay, so let's talk about the life lesson. So if the life purpose is kind of what you came here to do, you don't need training or anything. I mean, of course, you're in School of Wisdom, so you're going to feel like, oh, I have to read another book, or I have to take another class, or I have to study with this person, or I need more life experience, or whatever excuse. But you're wired to have this sort of spiritual teacher. Like, you're wired to kind of think in terms of seeing, seeing small, subtle things, messages, in the world. You're kind of wired to already be that way. So it's like you don't need to do anything. You're already,
More of an intuitive.
Yeah, it kind of comes naturally to you. But being in School of Wisdom, you're gonna feel like you need more training, or it's, there's the School of Wisdom is definitely like it's a challenge, especially with putting yourself out there as a healer. And I don't know how, influence from the family, because, there's always the family programming and that side that can be very challenging to kind of go in your own path, especially because you have your headline and your lifeline are very joined. So that means it's very easy for you to kind of try to fall back into the family way of thinking. You have to kind of go in that traditional thought. I see this more in like families that are really religious, where they want to, the family kind of carries on the same belief systems. So that's another thing, because the more you're aware of it, the more it's like it has less control on you.
Right.
So the life purpose is what you came here to be and to do. The school or the theme is just like the backdrop of your life. That's the school of wisdom. And then the life lesson is kind of what you came here to work on. So the more you can work on your life lesson, the more you can step up in your life purpose. But you can't really step up in your life purpose unless you address the life lesson.
Right.
So it's kind of like the weakest link you have to kind of work with. So your life lesson is one of the, it's called Mr. Not Enough. And it's basically, feeling that you're kind of short of something, that you don't have enough knowledge, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough lucky breaks, stuff like that. Like you feel trapped, helpless, that you can't somehow, you're never enough. Okay. And this is, it doesn't matter if you do really well. Like if you climb Mount Everest in a week, Mr. Not Enough is going to be like, well, why didn't you climb it in one day? So it's like no matter what you do, there's always going to be that voice of insufficiency, that you are not good enough, this wasn't good enough. So also being in School of Wisdom, it becomes Mr. Next Year. I will do it next year. I will do this when things are different. So that's real, like a red flag procrastination of like, doing things when they feel right. When they, other than any time, other than right now, basically. So basically, to access this power and self-worth, you have to visit the parts of yourself that feel powerless and worthless. It's always, because you're a spiritual teacher type, you have to kind of suffer that crises of meaning. You have to kind of go there and kind of be with that and kind of get yourself out of it in order to help others, right? Because not everyone's going to listen to a spiritual teacher if they haven't been through, if they haven't like found themselves.
Right.
So needs to suffer a crisis of meaning. You kind of need to endure the alienation, isolation, stagnation. It's kind of like a letting go of the ego stuff. Need to go through difficult times, kind of down the depths of deep emotion, darkness, in order to be able to guide others out of there. So you have to have been there and done that in order for you to, to kind of start to turn that life lesson into your ally. Instead of it just controlling you and being that critical voice that always controls you, but see it as like, oh, it's just there to remind me. It doesn't have to control me, but, I see what it's trying to do. Because the more you're going to step up in your life purpose, the more that voice is going to get louder and louder and louder. Unless you kind of use it as your ally and just start to track it. What did I say? Okay, so powerful means exercising independence of actions, setting your own life agenda, having confidence in your abilities, bringing your talents out into the world, standing up for yourself, saying no to violation. Self-worth means knowing you are okay, even if your circumstances aren't. Valuing yourself, not apologizing for who you are, not being manipulated by guilt. Adhering to your own ethical and moral code, even if it means risking disapproval. So, desire guilt is kind of, like if I get more specific with your life purpose. So basically learning to accept your desires, including the ones you wish you didn't have. the tendency is like people, they'll, with this life lesson, they'll be like, oh, I'm 50 and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Where they've never kind of learned what they want. They're kind of afraid of having a desire, or afraid of knowing what they want. It's been about what everyone else wants except for what they want.
Right.
So they've been, sacrificing, putting others ahead of themselves. And then they get kind of hijacked in someone else's life movie. They'll hop from job to job, and not really have some sort of purpose that's guiding their lives. And then there can be other problems that kind of seem to come from the outside, like a spouse that cheats, a child that's in trouble with the law, illicit desires played out by someone else. So basically, if it's in your hands, it's in your life, kind of a thing. So even if you aren't the one that's, experiencing these things, it's going to be something around you in your vicinity that's going to be showing up this way. So basically, bringing out the desires that you can access until you finally get to the true, deep desires that are within your psyche, the center of your being. And it basically comes down to this: am I okay enough for anyone to love me as I am? And the starting point is to just believe that you are okay the way you are. And I wrote, if you can keep an I want journal and the feelings that kind of arise out of this entire process, as a way to kind of get in touch with what your desires and wants are. So yeah, a lot of the times the desire guilt can come from feeling bad for wanting something, and then so they tend to shut down everything, shut down their desires, and they just tend to numb themselves out. And they take care of everyone else. They become part of someone else's movie, and then they don't have their own life. And this becomes doubly more red flag because you're in School of Wisdom, where it's easier to kind of not participate in your life because it's safer to not participate.
Right.
It's safer to not jump in. Yeah, because it's the whole thing with School of Wisdom is to just do anything to avoid exposure. Commitment is a state of consciousness, and so it's all about doing. Doing is available to anyone at any moment, regardless of circumstances. So these are questions that I just asked. So thoughts of really going for it, but not right now. Have you taken the path of least resistance? What is keeping you from putting yourself at stake right now? Do you bail when things get difficult? Have 5 careers in 10 years? That kind of a thing. Okay. So, your life purpose, spiritual teacher, public impact in the healing arts. You need to, this is the area of the dreams, imagination, intuition, spirituality, spiritual advisor, rabbi, monk, writer on metaphysical topics. And, not visiting that or not embodying that life purpose can show up as, lack of imagination, crisis of meaning, disillusionment, disconnected from the core self, stagnation, alienation, and all that stuff. So that's pretty much, let's see, what else do we got here? Yeah, I mean, your heartline is supposed to be, it looks like it wants to be a very fiery heartline, but it kind of goes to a more sweetie pie heartline.
Where is that?
So this one, it's wanting, the trajectory of the line wants to go up to here, right? See the trajectory of that line? But it's going this way. So it's kind of like you have this fiery part of yourself, this strong, you walk into a room, people know what you want, but you become the sweetie pie. So we say it's Gina and Donna's clothes. The Gina's the very fiery, the Donna's the very, takes in all the wounded cats, dogs, animals, likes connection, kind of the sensitive. They tend to be more about the other person in a relationship.
Selfless.
Yeah, so you tend to put the other person ahead. And
isn't that what you're supposed to do in a relationship?
It depends. Your life purpose for your hands, it's gonna be about self-care, coming back to your own self, because desire guilt, it's dangerous to have your own desires, right? You're not used to having your own desires. It's always been about what other people want.
Yeah, but isn't that the way to love others and be selfless? Is to
You have to check in. Are you living your life purpose? Are you, is the putting others ahead of yourself, is that coming from a place of where you get to, be that gifted healer and offer psychological insight? So it's like, are you doing it in a way where it's keeping you safe? Are you actually putting yourself out there in a vulnerable way by helping others? So it's the state of consciousness that you're inhabiting. Is it a way to kind of hide and, pay attention to someone else's life? Or is it a way that you're really getting a lot? It's helping you as a spiritual teacher by helping them.
probably both.
Yeah. So, yeah, and there is some X's on the heartline. That's issues of being supported. How can you be more supported? Can you allow others to support you in your, in however way? Usually when I see this is like someone that wants to do everything themselves, or they feel like they have to take care of everything themselves. They're not asking for help or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are some boxes that's kind of like boxed in by circumstances, kind of logistical logjam kind of a thing. But you do, let me show you on your hand, you have your Saturn line. Let me see the other hand. See, the Saturn line kind of comes from the family. This is kind of, but this Saturn line comes kind of halfway in kind of a, it could show up as like a career that starts later. But it stops kind of at the heart, and that could be, heart relationship stops career. Like as soon as you get in a relationship, you forget about the career or something like that. You forget about your purpose or your calling. So, just to kind of review everything, yeah, the overall theme of your life, you're supposed to be a wise spiritual teacher who has experienced lots of things in life by jumping off diving boards in a way that left you vulnerable emotionally. And through those experiences, you're able to offer insight and reach audiences by sharing your experiences and helping them. And learning what your desires are, the deep of your core. What are your deepest desires? And acknowledging them. You have a good thing to, like that, kind of like writing an I want journal. Just like, what is it like to say what you want? I want to do this. I want to do this with my life. I feel like eating sushi because I want to eat sushi, rather than what do you want to do? So it could start from something small. What do you want? It could be small because it's non-circumstantial. You will have this challenge has been in you since before you were born. This whole wiring. This is like your hand is like your brain mapped out on your hand. This is how you are wired. The challenge is about knowing what you want. And it's easy for you to put everyone ahead of yourself. And not really know what your, what your calling is. Because it's, it's easier to be hijacked by someone else's life movie than to pay attention to your own life movie. But, getting in touch with those desires and, seeing if they're deep down in your core what you really want. Just shining light on those is going to be powerful. Yeah, and the spiritual teacher, you need to kind of suffer a crisis of meaning. You need to kind of be down in the depths and to kind of work your way through that, navigate that energy, that stagnation, alienation, disillusionment in order to be able to help others that are going through the same stuff. Yeah. So, do you have any questions?
No, I mean, it's extremely interesting. It's extremely accurate.
Huh.
I'm kind of blown away a little bit by it.
Oh, okay.
So.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Okay.
How the hell do you know all that?
Well, your hands give me a very clear picture of what's going on. It's for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, hands don't lie.
It's different from like, like astrology where you're reading a laundry list. It's like you can kind of see how this all ties together into one thing. This is extra stuff. This is kind of the small stuff. I kind of mentioned, your life, as long as you remember public impact in the healing arts. Spiritual teacher is kind of where life is going to be juicy, and by taking those, personal exposure, putting yourself out there in a way that leaves you...
And this is what percent of the population?
Spiritual teacher is less than 1%. You have 2 of those markers. Okay, I usually see it only on one hand. I see it on 2 hands for you. Plus, you have public impact in the healing arts. So it's like doubly, this is what you need to be doing, kind of a thing. And, 10 arches, that's this type of fingerprint that you have. Can make it very challenging, though, to really put yourself out there. It's like, oh, I'm not ready, not ready, not ready, not ready, and then it's too late. I mean, you still got time. You still have, you're still young, so. Yeah, and you probably were the one that offered, you were the one that was the kid in the sandbox that would try to get the kids to get along. If someone was fighting or something, you were probably the one that, gave counseling to people.
Yeah, there's no need to be fighting, that's for sure.